Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co host, Emily.
Hi.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 44. I just want to give you an update on what's coming. We just finished interviewing. Our last one was Chris Robinson, the
Yeah.
Executive Vice President of the Maxwell Certified Leadership Team and author of From Drift to Drive. And I highly recommend you pick up that book and read it. Chris has written a very fine work there, and I think you could definitely learn from it. So, what is coming up between now and the end of the year, which will conclude season 2, episode 45? Emily and I have interviewed retired Fire Chief Wayne Kiewicz out of Minnesota. And you'll want to listen to his story, his amazing story of survival
Yeah.
and what he is doing now. And then following that, we are going to interview Paul Callan, retired colonel from the United States Marine Corps, and now working in an executive position with PKL Services out of San Diego. And I'll also add that Paul has written the foreword to my book, which Emily and I are going to be talking about that a little bit today.
Yeah.
Then we have Arjuna George, retired fire chief out of Canada and author of the book Burnt Around the Edges. And then I ran into an individual at the International Maxwell Certification in Orlando back in August, Jerry Macklin and his wife, Nicola. We struck up a conversation, and Jerry is a retired warrant officer from the Army, and so is his wife. So we're going to be interviewing him, and he will appear on December 4th, and then we will close out the year with our second interview with Chief Arjuna George, so we can dig deeper into his book about burnt around the edges. And then that will end our episodes for 2025. And then we will be moving into 2026, season number 3.
Crazy.
So, yeah, it is crazy. So today, what is happening today? Emily had a suggestion and she said, Dad, I'd like to interview you. And I said, okay. So that's where we are at.
Yep.
And Emily, is there anything else we need to say before I turn it over to you?
We're putting you in the hot seat today. And I just want to apologize to our listeners in advance if you hear me squeaking. I have a squeaky chair today. We're not in our normal chair today, and I'm trying to stay quiet, but it keeps squeaking. So hopefully it's not picking up on the mic, but if you hear the squeaking, we don't have a mouse, it's the chair.
Yeah, it's the chair. It's not our bones.
So we were just going to dive right on in. Thought it would be fun to put you in the hot seat and ask some questions, like kind of more casual, more fun, but also like just getting to know you more for our listeners to know who you are behind the microphone.
Okay.
So the very first question I have for you is why firefighting? Like what got you into that in the first place?
Well, some of our listeners who have been following us for a while, I'm sure that they've heard me say that I had my first ride on a fire truck when I was 3 years old in Cedarville, New Jersey. It was a Memorial Day parade, and they put me up on the hose bed, and I rode in that parade, and that spurred my interest on. The following year, there was a large fire in a small town called Fortescue down on the Delaware Bay, and big fire. And I've tried to do research, not tried. I have researched that fire, but I've not found anything out there, not yet. But when the trucks were coming through town from neighboring communities, you could hear the sirens, and my dad would take me out to the side of the street, and that's when the guys rode on the back on the tailboard, and I'd wave at them, and they'd wave back. And afterwards, my dad said, "Hey, I got something for you." We went inside, and a few minutes later, he came downstairs and he gave me his badge, as he had been a volunteer firefighter in Morristown, New Jersey, in Cumberland County. Him and my Uncle Ken. I still have that badge. It's upstairs in that shadow box, along with my other badges from my career. And Emily, from that point forward, I was interested in anything and everything related to firefighting. At our local library, I would check out books. They were kids' books, but they were on firefighting. When Dad was home and the fire siren went off, we'd always go out to the street to watch the trucks pull out. Because we were only about a block and maybe a block and a half from the firehouse. Sometimes they'd come by the house, other times they wouldn't, and sometimes Dad'd say, "Let's go see where they're going," and we could follow the water marks out in the street from where the water had sloshed out in the tanks. And so that just continued to grow. And then in 1972, the television show Emergency premiered on NBC about Station 51 in Los Angeles County. Two paramedics, Roy DeSoto and Johnny Gage. And then you had the engine, Captain Stanley and Mike Stoker, and then Chet Kelly. And I just spaced. I could picture him, but I just spaced the last firefighter's name that was on the rig. That's terrible because I still watch it, but that spurred my interest on even more. And then unfortunately, as my dad had a bad heart, and I came home from school when I was 14 and found him on the floor. And so we didn't have 911 then, dialed the operator, and she sent two firefighters down in a Cadillac ambulance from the Fairton Volunteer Fire Company. And when they were loading Dad up in the back of the ambulance, I said, "I'm going to do this as a career." And I started hanging out at the firehouse down the street after that, not too long after that. And eventually, one of the firefighters, an older firefighter named Art French, he was known as Frenchy, he started allowing me to do things, sweep up the truck bay, help them clean hose, talk on the radio, answer the phone. And then I still continued with my interest. There was a publication at the time called The Visiting Fireman, and I subscribed to that, and I started corresponding with firefighters around the world. And then I met a gentleman out of Philadelphia, Bill Proudman was his name. And Bill, he passed away some years back, but at that time he was the chief of the Reserve Fire Force over in Philadelphia. And, in a way, he began to mentor me, and then got tied in with another Philadelphia firefighter named Rich Gardner. And Rich was a retired lieutenant over there. He had suffered multiple heart attacks and was medically retired, but Rich spent a lot of time on the telephone with me, mentoring me, talking to me about firefighting, talking to me about becoming a firefighter. And so, Emily, to sum that up, there was two things that I wanted to do in life. Number one, be a fireman. And number two, be in the military. And praise God, I was able to do both of those.
Yeah, that's really neat. So would you say being a firefighter is in your blood?
Definitely. When I interviewed at Loveland Fire Rescue and they were asking me about my background, I remember one of the men that was interviewing me, his name is Dave Chapman. He said, "Well," he says, "I'm convinced that if you fell over and your head cracked open, fire trucks would come out."
I could see that.
So yeah, it's
Like
in
me with sprinkles.
it's in my blood. Even though I retired from Loveland Fire Rescue after a 37-year career as a firefighter, nearly 30 here in Loveland, but doing it in Cedarville, New Jersey, and then in the Air Force and in the Marine Corps for a total of 37 years. Yeah, I'm still involved with the fire service. With my business, Fire Officer Leadership Academy.
Yeah.
And just 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, was out in Montebello, California, with man Brian Hines that I've been working with now for some years. And, we were doing one of the hazmat modules from the California Specialized Training Institute. So we had a good number of firefighters. I think the total student number was 26, most of them from Montebello Fire. And we had one from Rialto Fire Department and then two from Rancho Cucamonga.
Cool. Yeah. I think I've said since you've retired that you can take the guy out of the firehouse, but you can't take the firehouse out of the guy.
Yeah, you're
It
absolutely
really
right.
is in your blood, and you're so passionate about all things firefighting.
It is, and I've had people tell me they say they could tell that I'm passionate about it when they start talking to me about the fire service, and I enjoy talking to people who want to become firefighters, but I also love mentoring and coaching firefighters, whether it's on a one-on-one basis or a small group basis.
Yeah.
Out there in Montebello, and we were conducted. It was the final week of a 6-week series. This was the specialist series, and it was a week filled with 10 different exercises. And when we got to the point that we were involving the entire class, I really enjoyed being around the 2 battalion chiefs that were there. They had set up their command posts, and then working with them when one of them would fill the role as the incident commander and the other one was filling the role as the hazmat group supervisor. I enjoyed working with them, you know, mentoring them, even though it was an exercise and essentially a test for them, but also mentoring them, asking them questions, and getting them to think down a different line and start thinking, out of the box as to how they could approach this training exercise, which will translate out to what's happening on the street.
That's cool. So, going into the culture of the firehouse, and the brotherhood, do you have any favorite memories in the firehouse or being a firefighter?
I have a lot of favorite memories, and I'll start back in Cedarville when I was hanging around down there. And I'm sure when I first started hanging out, Cedarville's a small town, so everybody knows everybody, and they would have known that my dad, had died. And I am sure that some of them were wondering, what's this kid doing here? But eventually they never ran me off, and they accepted me. And so that was my first exposure to the camaraderie of the fire services, is watching them, seeing how they interacted with each other, and seeing how they ate. And then when I was able to join the volunteer fire company, which is funny in itself because they send 3 guys to your house to interview you. And so when you got 3 guys in New Jersey to show up wearing suits and ties, dark suits and ties at nighttime, it's like, okay, who they work
Right.
for, what's the deal here? Yeah, what are the cops, the insurance agents,
Yep.
or mafia? Yeah, but no, and so then they brought me on, and then I became part of that tight-knit group in the fire company. And so I love that. And some of my favorite memories from Cedarville revolve around the food that we were eating. We had a lot of Italians
Oh,
on the fire
nice.
company. Well, as a matter of fact, the fire chief's name was Mike Scarlatta. And well, his 2 boys are still members of the fire company there in Cedarville, and one of them's the current fire chief. So that's kind of interesting to see. But I had worked for Mike down the street at the local Exxon gas station, and his dad had initially owned the business. It was Scarlatto's Exxon, and Mike's dad, Tony, he made some of the best spaghetti sauce that you'd ever have in your life, and the meatballs were fantastic.
Did
And
they pass down the recipe to you?
no, they did not. I think it was either a family secret or it went to the grave with Tony. But some of the other things that we had, because we're close to the Delaware Bay, we ate a lot of blue crabs. And they would cook them up in the red spaghetti sauce, and then also a clear sauce. Not an Alfredo sauce, but a clear sauce. And we had guys that would fish. And so we would have fish fries. And I just really enjoyed that. And so it was that camaraderie, and then that carried on to when I was a firefighter in the military, and then carried on to when I was a firefighter in Loveland. So, some of my fondest, best memories revolve around the camaraderie that we had, and the brotherhood that exists in the fire service, and then
Yeah.
also that carrying over to when I would visit fire departments in different parts of the United States. And then when I had that opportunity to go to Germany, and when I was taking pictures of fire trucks, it's just that, hey, he's a brother firefighter. And I just had some fantastic memories. myself and one of our firefighters from Loveland here, we're out in California. I was teaching hazmat. He was in the class, and we went down to Los Angeles, and they had just taken delivery a week before of a brand new fireboat. We were there on a Friday evening, and they let us in. Firefighter gave us a tour of the boat, said, "You want a cup of coffee?" Sure.
Mm.
And we went up into the kitchen, and the captain that night was celebrating his 32nd anniversary on the Los Angeles Fire Department. He had his hands in his pocket and he was rocking back and forth on his heels. He said, "Hey, you boys want to ride on the boat?" It's like, yeah.
That'd be cool.
So they got the crew together. I mean, there was no question about it at all. And we went out on the boat. We were out in the harbor. They were pumping water and showing us how, to operate it. That's one of my fond memories. And when I went to Germany, our friend Sven Volkow and
Yeah.
Jörg Christensen and Jürgen Kiefer, which unfortunately, Jürgen passed away here a couple of
Mhm.
years ago. And just a red carpet that was rolled out for me in that 2 weeks while I was there in Germany, visiting the different fire departments and getting rides in the apparatus and visiting the fireboat in Frankfurt, Germany. And
Cool.
and Emily, I could just go on and on. Uh, I have fond memories of being at the scene of incidents and extended incidents. Bless
Amazing.
you. Well, extended incidents, especially like wildland fires, where you're just breaking out an MRE and you're with people eating out on the side of the mountain. And so
Yeah.
those things just really stick with me.
I love that. I love how you talk about that it's a brotherhood, and I would like you to talk more about that. But something I saw that was really cool on social media like a little while ago is there's this girl who just got married, and her dad was in the NYC fire department, and he was involved in 9/11 and passed away during 9/11, unfortunately. And she had this reel up that the men from her dad's fire station like came to her wedding to support her, to be that to be like her dad
Yeah.
basically, and walk her down the aisle. Like they brought the rig and everything, and the whole crew came. And she was like, I had always heard that they said like the fire department is a brotherhood, and she's like, and I experienced it this time, and I now understand what they mean about it being a brotherhood. And I was it really touched me, being a fireman's daughter and growing up in this
Mhm.
industry. So, and we have a personal experience with that when you got really sick, but it's just really cool because like I know we've used that term a lot, that the fire department is a brotherhood, and like seeing her experience that and like how they came and supported her when her dad could not be there for her since he passed away was just like it really blew me away.
Yeah, well, that's you mentioned when I was sick, and for those of you from Love on Fire that are listening to this podcast and you were around in 2013, you'll remember what had happened. I was the training chief
Yeah.
at the time, and coming into January of 2013, I got sick and just continued to get more sick, turned respiratory, lost my voice completely, lost my voice
Yeah.
for 3 days total. And I moved into the training chief's position in May. And may I share what happened with you?
Yeah. Mhm.
Emily got T-boned in a car accident one Sunday when I was still the B shift battalion chief, and
Yeah.
got to respond on my own daughter's motor vehicle accident. And so here we're moving into June, July, early part of August, and it's hot, and I'm wearing my job shirt outside. I'm coming home,
Yeah.
plopping in the recliner because I'm so tired, and Emily and my wife Deb are covering me up with blankets. And this is July and August,
Yeah.
June, July, and August. And ultimately in August, as it just continued to get worse, I'd gone to my doctor and he checked me out and he sent me to a cardiologist and he said, "There's nothing wrong with you." And it's like, well, I'm feeling pretty sick. And frankly, that guy was an idiot. I didn't like the way that he handled me. They did a stress echo test on me and got me up on the treadmill, and the guy was just firing questions off like I was a criminal. I stopped answering his questions. And so we went through the thing, and 2 weeks later, you know, Deb, my wife, your mom said, "Why don't you start back over at the clinic again?" The fire department had a clinic, and I went back over there. That was a Friday afternoon. Monday morning, the PA, whose name was Rebecca, called the house here, tracking me down. And Deb said, "Well, he's at work." So she called me and said, I completely misunderstood her. And she called me, and I thought she was telling me I need to go get more blood work done and come over here and pick this blood work up. So okay, it's like, man, I got stuff to do here at the training area. Drive up to her office, pick up the blood work, and I look at it and I say, wow, there's some stuff here that's really out of whack. So I went over to the medical center of the Rockies, the lab, walked in, and the lady said, well, we don't have orders for you. You got to call her back and she could fax over the orders. And you're probably looking at a minimum 45 minutes. Excuse me, before we can get you in. Like, all right. So I called over at the clinic, and Rebecca actually answered the phone. And she said, you don't understand me, Rick. She said, something is seriously wrong with you. Get in the ER right now.
Yeah.
Get in there. Like, okay, all right, I'll go. So, hey, I'm in the staff vehicle. Pardon me, folks. I'm in the staff vehicle. I drive around back to the emergency room. I know what's going to happen in there. And I've been a fireman for a long time. I know what goes on in the ER. They're not going to give you anything to eat or drink. So, 9:15 in the morning, I sit in the truck and like eat my lunch. So I'm not going to go in there hungry because who knows how long I'll be in there. And I walk in, and I'm in uniform. And so bang, I mean, I'm in the back. I hand the triage nurse the blood work from the clinic, and her eyes just got really big. And bang, I was in one of the examination rooms, and they were all over me. And the doc came in, and she said, we got to figure out what's going on here. They dropped so many tubes to take blood in my lap. I've never seen that many tubes. And I asked her, I said, so, hey, when can I go back to the training area? And she reached out and tapped the top of my boot and said, well, we'll just see about that. And I don't know, it was maybe 45 minutes went by, and she came in and she said, well, Rick, you better call your wife and get her over here. And you better call work and tell them you're not coming back. She said, you are in acute kidney failure, and we need to figure out why and what's going on here. And being the Jersey Wise guy, I laughed and I said, yeah, acute kidney failure. I said, that's kind of fatal, ain't it? And she says, yes, it is. And so they said, we're moving you up to a room. And they wheeled me out. And, Deb, she went up to the fourth floor before me, had my things, and she met me at the elevator. I get a little choked up about this. And she said, there's some people waiting here for you. And there were most of the chief officers were there waiting for me. And they got me squared away in a room. One of the nurses, I vaguely had recognized her. And, because so much was going on, and come to find out she was the daughter of one of our retired firefighters and married to one of our firefighters. And so over those next 6 days of me being in the hospital, Emily, my room was filled with blue uniforms. When the guys was off duty, they were coming to the room. You remember it. You remember what was going on there. I was getting phone calls from, firefighters from other fire departments, and just to support even the mechanics, Corey and Warren. They started a food train for us, which hallelujah, I'm so thankful for that, because the hospital food I hate. And I'm still amazed to this day that the doctors didn't stop that because of what was going on. And so, folks, what was going on? And for those of you who were with Loveland Fire, Poudre Fire, Greeley Fire, at the time, and you made those phone calls and you came and visited me. If you're listening, and I'm so thankful for it. It has just
Yeah.
such an impact. Uh, Greg Gilbert, who's now down a battalion chief down at Frederick Firestone, going and picking up, a big ice green tea and taking it to work for
Yeah.
you,
That
Emily.
meant so much.
Yeah, yeah, Greg, if you're listening to this, thank you for doing that. Mike Sorosky, you're now up in Washington State as a chief officer, coming and visiting me. Tiffany Lipsky, who worked at the Human Performance Lab up at Colorado State University
Yeah.
doing our physicals, she came. I think I mentioned Warren and Corey from Vehicle Maintenance who worked on our apparatus. Dwayne McDonald, who was the fire chief over at Greeley Fire at that time, called me, prayed with me. Our chief, Randy Morawski, was not able to come to the hospital, but he called me because him and his wife, Judy, were on their way to Chicago for an award. He had been nominated and had received the award for the Fire Chief of the Year
Hmm.
in 2013. But,
Wow.
Chief Morawski called me, prayed with me, and folks, we wanted to have Chief Morawski on here and interview him, but something personal came up and not able to get him on. But it's my desire to have him come on in 2026,
Yeah.
as he's probably the best fire chief that I ever worked for in my 37-year career. But that's what was going on, folks, with the camaraderie and the
Yeah.
brotherhood, and to bring this story to an end, because I don't want to leave it hanging, is acute kidney failure. In 2008, I was diagnosed with a form of cancer called MGUS, monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance, and that had progressed. It had progressed to smoldering multiple myeloma and another one called amyloidosis. And so I was discharged from the hospital with 30% of my kidney function. And on that Thursday night when I was in the hospital, we had, what was it, probably 20 people from a church that we'd gone to
Yeah.
that were around my hospital bed praying
Right.
for me. And I was having my blood work drawn on a monthly basis. The oncologist, she had a plan lined out for me. He was going to do stem cell, but starting with chemo first and then stem cell. And then we got into October and the blood work changed. And Deb said, I think God's answered our prayers. Me, OU of little faith, said, I think the lab made a mistake. The next day we went to the kidney doc and he said, I don't know what's going on here, Rick. He said, when I discharged you, you only had 30% of your kidney function. He says, now you're running about 90 to 95%. And he said, I don't know what to tell you. He said, I've never seen anything like this. And Deb told him about everybody praying for me in the room. And he said, well, I don't know about that. You're going to have to talk to Dr. Stroh. So that next day was my appointment with Dr. Stroh, the oncologist. And she sat in her office and her mouth was just hanging open. And she said, Rick, if it was only me, I would be apologizing to you and Deb because, Deb was with me. And she said, I would be apologizing to you. She said, we have had 5 doctors on your case. Because one of the things that they were amazed about is my vitamin D3 levels were so high. One of the oncologists said, I don't know why you're alive. He said, you should be dead
Yeah.
with your D3 levels being this high. He wanted to use me for a research project, and I said no.
I've got one of those too.
I like research, but I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be your research project. No, no, no way. So coming back
Yeah,
to
they
that,
get all the accolade and the payment, and you
yeah,
just get paid.
yeah, and we pay out to them while they're doing the research on us. It's like, no way, buddy. Yeah, but Dr. Stroh, she was great. And that day in her office, she said, 5 doctors, Rick, 5 doctors. And we confirmed the diagnosis. She said, the smoldering multiple myeloma and the amyloidosis is gone. She said, the MGUS is still there.
Yeah.
And Deb told her about everybody in my room that night praying. And she said, this is divine intervention in your life. She said, us doctors, we think we're so smart. And she said, this is nothing more than divine intervention. Well, come to find out, like us, she's a follower of Jesus and she believes in the power of prayer.
Yeah.
But I could not talk about camaraderie, Emily, and what happened during those 6 days in the hospital without following up with that and letting
Absolutely.
everybody know that was God's hand on my life and on
Yeah.
the life of our family. And He has allowed me to continue to live so much longer
Yeah.
past when my dad died, to allow me now to still work with firefighters, to work with the singles group in church, to lead the men's Bible study in church, and then
Mhm.
attend the Bible study that one of the lieutenants from the fire department runs, and to be able to contribute and pour into the lives of firefighters.
And be there for your daughters.
Yes, and be there for our
Okay.
daughters and my wife, which we just celebrated 38 years of marriage. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And yeah, just going back to that brotherhood, what is it, a wave of blue or sea of blue?
I'd say we see a blue.
Sea of blue. Every day there was just a sea of blue. It was a
Mhm.
constant
Yeah,
revolving door
it was.
of firemen just visiting and being there for us. It was absolutely incredible.
Well, yeah, the charge nurse had been married to one of the firefighters at
Yeah.
Loveland. And she told me later on when I was over there for one of my visits that they had a discussion about that and said, should we be allowing all these people coming into Rick's room? And she said, yeah, he needs it. They want to be there. They're firefighters. I know what
Yeah.
it's like for them. We're
Yeah.
not going to shut that down.
Yeah. I'm so thankful for that. So let's end on a more fun note.
Absolutely.
I think our time is ending, so maybe do like a little pop question.
Sure.
Popcorn.
Pop
Not
question. And we're going to talk about my book, are we?
I think we should save your book for another podcast because I have quite a few questions, and so I think we have enough time
Alrighty.
for another podcast for that. So, let's talk about the pranks at the firehouse because the firehouse isn't all serious. There's definitely jokes and games and pranks that are played on each other. So, talk about that. That
Yeah.
was like at least one prank.
Yeah, there's a lot that could go on in the firehouse. There's a lot of
Shenanigans.
humor, shenanigans. There's a lot of dark humor that people who are not in fire, police, EMS,
Yeah.
or the military probably would be appalled at. But
Yeah.
it was our outlet. You know, had to be our outlet.
Yeah.
But um, at I can't remember exactly what year this happened. Now, in general, I'm pretty good at remembering years. But a little museum was put together here at Loveland for Loveland Fire Rescue. And our operations chief at that time, Ed Sparks was his name, he was able to secure a mannequin that J.C. Penney no longer needed. And the intent was for the mannequin to go over to the museum so they could put, bunker gear on it. In some parts of the country, they call it turnout gear. Here in Colorado, we call it bunkers, and or a uniform. Well, this mannequin started showing up in random places in Fire Station 1 with a Loveland Fire uniform on. And you and there were some parts of the station that were dark, and if you heard somebody yell out, it's like, oh, there it was, there's the mannequin.
Did he have a name? Did people name
We didn't
him?
have a name for
Okay.
that one there, but they put the name tag of one of the firefighters, on there, and so that was pretty funny. And another one of our rescue dummies, that wound up at Station 1. And I think the funniest use of that one, that one was called Dirty Steve. And it happened over on another shift. It was the time it was A shift, and the A shift battalion chief's name, Jeff, is the engine one crew had taken Dirty Steve and put him on the toilet in the battalion chief's bunk room. And Jeff needed to use the toilet, but he couldn't get the door open because Dirty Steve was in there sitting on it.
It's so funny. Yeah, you guys did a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah,
And then let's talk about the food at the firehouse.
yeah.
What's the craziest meal you had?
I'd say the craziest meal I had is the guys at Station 6 nicknamed it the Heart Attack Burger. One of them had eaten at the restaurant up in Fort Collins, and then they told me about this, and I'll describe it here in a second. And they told me about it, said, "Hey, you need to come out, Chief, and eat." I said, "Man, I can't. I don't want to eat that thing." And then the next time they made it, well, they talked me into it. So I came out to Station 6 to have the Heart Attack burger. And the heart attack burger is a glazed donut cut in half. It's a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Has a fried egg on top of it and bacon, and then you pour maple syrup over the top of it.
Oh my.
And so I'm out there. I got dispatched to a call on the other side of town. Came back. Of course, it's cold, so I warm it up. I ate the whole thing, but it sat in my belly like a brick. And I vowed I will never ever have this again. Well, about a year and a half later, I gave in. The guys up at Station 2 said, "Hey, we're making the heart attack burger. We really want you to come out for supper." So I gave in and I went out. I would say that is probably the craziest thing in 37 years of the fire service that I ate.
Have you ever touched a burger with a donut again?
I've never done that.
So funny.
Again.
So, what was your most requested meal that you would make and why?
Cheeseburgers. Firefighters can be so not suspicious. How come I just lost the superstitious? Superstitious.
Yeah.
There you go. Firefighters could become so superstitious. So I would be my turn to cook, and I made cheeseburgers. Well, we had a structure fire, and not one, but then we had two. And it's like, oh wow. So the next time it was my turn to cook, I made cheeseburgers and we had fires. And then the guys would say, now, for those of you who are not in the fire service, you got to understand the mentality of firefighters. We came on the job to fight fires. At least Rick Davis came on the job to fight fires and go to calls and go to emergencies.
It's in the title, fire.
Yeah.
Fighting.
Now there's people who, their career track takes them down the path of fire prevention. And a lot of departments now call that community safety. My path didn't. My path was always operational. And yeah, you see a lot of nasty garbage that's out there. But the philosophy of many of us is this is why we came on the job. It's going to happen, and I want to be there when it happens. And so then all of a sudden, the shift is starting to think, hey, when Davis is cooking cheeseburgers, we're going to have a fire or we're going to have some type of a complex incident. And Emily, it was crazy. Every time I made cheeseburgers, something big was happening. So that's my crazy food story.
So they probably got really excited when you made cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
Or requested it. Well, I think that's a good ending for now. But do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. At some point we could talk about my book again.
Yep.
The Furnace of Leadership
For sure.
Development, available out there on Amazon, paperback, ebook, and in the audio version as well. And folks, now what I do is I still teach leadership. I absolutely love teaching leadership. One of my key classes is called Commanding the Chaos, and that's coupled with the Informed Incident Commander, an 8-hour class. As I mentioned earlier at the start of this podcast, I mentor and I coach firefighters, and coaching that I do is different than the coaching that the fire service is familiar with, because I dig in and I ask the person questions, and it helps them get over the walls, the barriers, the stumbling blocks that they have. And of course, we've got our podcast that we do here. I've got a weekly blog that gets released on LinkedIn, and I have a monthly newsletter that I write for Christian firefighters. And I do have two leadership assessments that I can do for individuals, and then also for departments or anybody else. Somebody might be listening to this thing and you're not in fire. I could come in, I could teach leadership into your organization. You don't have to be firefighters, and you don't have to be a firefighter to listen to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick. So that would be my closing statements.
That's great. Well, this was fun, and we'll have to do this again, and we'll do one specifically on the book, because I have questions for the book itself.
And folks, this was Emily's idea to do this. And Emily had said, hey, Dad, I want to interview you. I was like, okay. All right. So there we go. So with that, Emily, Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, Igniting Leadership Excellence. And we will see you on the next episode. So long.
Bye.